How's it going, everybody? It's Heaven's Mouthpiece here, backing up with another video. Today I will be doing a book review on this right here, Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami, his most famous novel. And now I'm going to subject you to unbearably loud music once again. Play. Huge shout out to all of you who made it through that unbearably loud music and came back to watch another one of my videos. I really appreciate it. And just like the rest of the videos that I've made and all the ones I'll make in the future, I'm not going to keep you waiting. I'm going to give you what you came here for. So overall, I love this book. I give it an 8.5 out of 10. I'd love to give this a book a 10, and I wish I could read more 10s, but there's a couple reasons why I didn't like this book. Let me first start to say that I thought a lot of the characters were a bit too pompous and maybe blazing. They had a little bit too much flair to them, where I could obviously tell this wasn't real. It was more of just how the characters thought of themselves, rather than just getting to perceive the characters like I prefer to in a novel. I think a lot of the issue here comes from Murakami seeing a lot of himself in these characters and making those certain characteristics far more prominent than other parts, which would have made this story more natural. Now, other than that, I really loved this book. There were so many things to like. Probably my favorite part was just the imagery portion. Just like every other Murakami book I've ever read, he really paints the picture unlike anyone else in literature. The scenery ranges from the big city to small towns and even into rural Japan, which I felt like I was really there throughout the whole entire journey, and that I could really see what was going on. And it made me really want to go to Japan, which is one of my life goals, but that's besides the point. Just like a lot of other Murakami novels, there was tons of imagery and just themes about jazz clubs, records, drinking, a lot of coffee. Apparently every person's addicted to coffee, but I guess they are in the real world, so that's not too different from what's going on here in the book. Overall though, I couldn't stop turning the pages. Murakami really has this thing that gets me to just keep plowing through his books. I swear I read this in under a weekend. It takes me forever to read anything these days, and my attention span in TikTok just basically a goldfish. Now I suppose I should give you a little bit of background about Murakami and maybe this book. Assuming that you don't know much, but if you're seeing this video, I bet that you have. Now, Murakami here wrote Norwegian Wood. This is his most famous novel and really blew him up in Japan and everywhere else. I think it's translated in like 54 languages or something. Someone can fact check me on that, please leave it in the comments below. But surprisingly, Murakami became an author on accident. He wrote a novel and then submitted to a contest and ended up winning, and I guess everything kind of sprouted up from there. How I heard about him myself was, I believe he was boys with Yukio Mishima, who's probably my favorite Japanese writer. Or maybe they just knew each other through relation and I heard them on like a PewDiePie video once. All in all, Murakami is one of Japan's most prolific writers and probably one of the best well known. So the next thing I'm going to get to here is the plot summary. Well, I'm not going to give too much away about the book, just enough to where you kind of know what's going on and it maybe makes you want to read the book as well. I'm going to go over a couple points. I classify this novel as a coming-of-age tragedy, which is maybe the best kind of tragedy or the best coming-of-age story. You tell me which one it is. So this starts with Toru, who is our main character. He's 37 years old in an airport and he hears the song Norwegian Wood by the Beatles. This immediately brings Toru back to his 19 going on 20 years when he was entering college. Now, back in high school, he used to be best friends with this guy named Kazuki, and Kazuki's girlfriend was his girl named Naoko. Kazuki sadly decided to kill himself for reasons that are kind of unbeknownst in the novel. We get a little spice of what happened, but not too much. Over the course of the novel, Toru and Naoko began to fall in love, and Toru begins to understand more about the turmoil that had gone on in both of their lives, and he learns a lot about Naoko and really the issues with her. Later in the novel, we see Naoko is actually going a bit loony in the head and she gets sent off to this mental facility. She's there to heal, and Toru goes to visit her, and he really seems to be trying his best, but Naoko only seems to be getting worse, and it seems like the burden of suicide has really been passed to her at this point. Also during this time, Toru meets a girl named Midori. Midori is also troubled in some ways, but she's pretty resilient as a person and is going through a lot in her own life, and Toru begins some sort of a relationship with her, but it's not physical, just barely emotional. They decide to stay friends since Midori also has a boyfriend. Toru continues waiting for Naoko, who is just getting worse and worse at this point, and eventually things come to an unpleasant end with her. And after that, he kind of goes off the rails and is barely saved by a sailor that he runs into on accident who really snaps him out of it. Now this is the end of the story, and at this point we see that Toru tries to get back in touch with Midori, and this is really the person he probably should have been pursuing the entire time, but we don't really see what happens after that. In a classic Murakami way, he leaves up the ending to our interpretation, a little bit to our interpretation, less so than his other novels, but nonetheless, we have to decide what happens from the story here on out. The main theme that this novel operates around, you probably already guessed, is love and intimacy. Since the entire novel really revolves around the relationship between Toru and then Naoko, and then a bit with Midori, we can see that's really what Murakami's trying to focus on here. Now within this love and intimacy theme, we see a lot about communication and how these characters sometimes deliberately lie to one another to try and push certain realities which just aren't happening. And a lot of the times they're not really accepting what's going on. And just like any good tragedy, there's obviously death, which is something that is really focused on in the book. And you'll see a lot about suicide or just hearing about other people dying. And since there's so much focus about love and intimacy and death, we get a lot of focus on past here. And I think this is where Murakami did a really good job on the nostalgia end. He made every single scene seem like it was something to be remembered. Now, you also have to remember that this is all within Toru's memories, since he was at the airport and reminded that he had these memories. So this is some interesting stuff that I think Murakami does with the novel that really has a powerful effect. Now, in my own terms, I think there's a lot going on in this story, but there's a few key takeaways that I'll focus on. What I think Murakami is mainly trying to get across in this novel and address was the fact that your actions can have serious effects on other people, and the burdens that you take will stay with you forever. And not only will these burdens stay with you, but after you pass as an individual, these burdens will be passed on to others. Now we see this sort of in the relationship between Kazuki and Naoko, where the suicide torch is almost passed to her. And we see this in many other aspects of the novel, where it is eventually passed to Toru, who then decides to not continue with it. This is something that a lot of other popular texts or even movies try to address. One of my favorite shows, Cowboy Bebop, the ending scene relates to this significantly. It leaves off with a quote saying, "You're going to carry that weight." And I think this resonates specifically here in this novel, since the characters have to carry the weight that their past actions have led on them for the rest of their lives. Besides addressing the burdens that you receive from others and the weight that you have to carry from your past, I think something that Murakami is really trying to emphasize in this novel and does really well is trying to be honest with yourself and understanding the reality that you're currently living in. There are dozens, if not hundreds of times throughout this novel where the characters could sit back and just take a look at their situation and really readdress their position and their reality and then choose to make different decisions. Now, this is something that some of the characters can do, like Midori, who really tries to push forward, but others have a much harder time with. Murakami does a great job blending this all together and making a profound impact on the reader. In Norwegian Wood, you see why he is one of the most read Japanese authors of all time. He's extremely powerful and has amazing writing skill that will really blow anyone away, especially in this novel. It just keeps you turning the pages. And still, my only qualm with the book is just some of the characters are a little bit more blazing or have some strange personalities, and some of the big critics about this book say that the females in here are portrayed as crazy people, which honestly they are, but you know, it was Japan in like the 70s when he wrote this, and I don't really understand too much about the society over there. I'm not going to talk too much about it. Reminds me very much of the manic pixie dream girl fantasy that's kind of being pushed in America right now, you know, Scott Pilgrim, that sort of deal. But that's going to be all from me, guys. I really enjoyed this book. I think you guys should go check it out, listen to it on audiobook, do whatever you can to get a hold of it. As always, thanks for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it. Now, if you could do me a big favor and hit the like button below, and if you really like me, please subscribe. I really appreciate it. It keeps me going making these videos. Now, if you could also drop a comment, maybe leaving some ideas for me to make future videos, that would be awesome, and I'll probably do it. See you next time.